All right, welcome everyone to the next episode of Kotaku. Today we are going to interview Mr. Edward Sarich, as many of you know as Ted. So, hi Ted,
Hi,
how you doing?
pretty good, thanks. How about you, Dan?
I'm all right. So, welcome and thank you for joining us today. And so we're just gonna chat a little bit about you and have a nice conversation, I hope, and hopefully the students can learn a little bit more about you.
Okay, good. Yeah.
You obviously live in Japan, but when did you come here initially?
It's hard to remember. I think it was 1992 or 93. Yeah. So quite a long time ago. A lot longer than I'd like to remember.
All right, and what kind of sparked your interest in Japan?
Well, I was studying music and I was studying classical piano and I'd finished my degree in psychology, but I wanted to continue studying classical music. So I was in music university, and my father paid for my university degree, my first university degree. But when I just told him I wanted to study classical music in university, he said, "Well, you're going to have to pay for that yourself." So I had a huge student loan. I was 2 years deep into a degree in music, and I amassed a big student loan. I had a huge student loan. And at the time, Japan was in a bubble, and I kind of was burnt out from studying music. And I was worried about the debt. My father was calling me every day and warning me about how it would be hard to pay off this debt. And I had some friends of mine that were living in Japan at the time, and they were teaching English and having fun and making a lot of money. It was the bubble, so or maybe the end of the bubble, but anyways, it just seemed like Japan was economically really strong and Canada wasn't. So I decided to take a year off, and I had friends here who said they would set me up with a job, and they did. So I came here, and I loved it. And I worked really hard, and I continued to live a life like a college student, even though I was working in Japan. I kind of ate pasta and butter every day, and I never went out because I really, the purpose was just to pay off my student loan, and I did. I paid off my student loan in a year, and I remember because normally when you pay off a student loan, you pay it off, every month, and I just sent my dad this big check, and he paid the whole thing off in one shot. And but then I was broke. Then I was, even though I had no student loan, I still had no money. So instead of 1 year, it became 2 years, and I kind of lost my interest in continuing. I liked studying music, but I didn't know what I wanted to do as a career. I didn't know how that would fit into my life, and I kind of made a decision that music would be a hobby for me. And then I decided, I became interested in Japanese and studying Japanese more, and I got more interested in Japanese culture and traveling around Japan. And I went home for a year actually after 2 years of being in Japan, and I kind of felt reverse culture shock. I never felt like I really, after 2 years in Japan, when I went home, I didn't know really where I fit in, and I had all these great Japanese experiences, and nobody really to share them with because nobody could really understand. At the time, I remember my family said to me, "Oh, do you speak Chinese?" And I said, "Well, no, because I was in Japan." And they were like, "Oh, that's the same language, isn't it?" And I'm like, "No, it's quite different." And so in those times, in those days, I'm sounding like an old man, but 25 years ago, a lot of the people that I was come from a kind of a not a large town, and they didn't know the difference between China and Japan really. Anyway, I went home and I didn't really feel that connected anymore. I had all these experiences to share that nobody could really relate with. And I was working, but not really knowing what I wanted to do. And my heart was still in Japan. I realized I really missed it. And so I applied for the JET program, which is an English teaching position. I think a lot of people know they have ALTs in high schools and junior high schools, right? So I applied for that program, but not as a teacher, as a kind of a coordinator. A small percentage of the JET program participants, they don't work as teachers, they work as administrators in government offices. So they kind of help facilitate the JET program. And they also kind of act as, I think my position was coordinator for international relations, which, I'd go to different events. I would become the international face of these local government agencies. And I remember they asked, it was done by region and nobody applied for my region. So I was accepted based on that, even though one of the requirements for the position was to speak Japanese really well. My Japanese was not very good, but because the positions were chosen by region, all the people from San Francisco applied. There was maybe 100 people that applied, but my region, I was the only person that applied. So I got the coordinator for international relations job, and suddenly I was given a position in Kobe in the Department of International Relations for the Hyogo prefectural government, which was at the time, it was just about a year and a half after the 1995 earthquake in Kobe. So it was really, really kind of high profile. The governor had lots of visitors coming to see the status of the reconstruction. And suddenly there's me, who doesn't speak very good Japanese, kind of helping to translate and helping to become the international face of this. So it was a lot of pressure for me. And I remember one of my bosses, they were really nice people, but one of my bosses wanted me to go to become a professional interpreter, to go to interpreting school so that I could interpret for the governor of Hyogo Prefecture, which I couldn't do because it was in Tokyo and it was very expensive and I lived in Kobe. So I just did the best that I could. I helped with translation. I did a lot of proofreading work and I spent 3 years there and studied Japanese a lot. And I loved Kobe and I love the people and that I work with. I love my job. But as you know, the JET program is a 3-year maximum contract. So I didn't know what I was going to do after that. And there weren't a lot of opportunities at the time. So I remember I wanted to stay in Kobe, but there was a good position in a human resources for Alpine, a company called Alpine, which was it was a stereo and GPS company that was in Iwaki City in Fukushima. And I worked for the International Relations Department there as International Human Resources. So, but I hated the job. It was terrible because I was just working from morning to night. I think I started work at 7:30 in the morning and I finished, I'd leave work at 8:30 at night and everyone around me would be like, "Are you leaving already?" And I was just a single lonely guy in Fukushima, in Iwaki City in Fukushima. It was cold too. I didn't like the weather. I just didn't feel I really fit in. So I spent about a year there. And then when my contract ended, I decided to return to Kobe. And then I started getting into teaching. I got a job. I had some contacts when I was was working in Kobe. And I ended up getting a job in a high school and working there. And I kind of fell in love with teaching. I was teaching and coaching basketball, and they had a boys basketball team with no coach. So I was helping coach and playing ball with them. And I just loved Kobe, and that was a really fun time in my life. I really enjoyed. The students were really low level, but good kids. And I really enjoyed teaching them and kind of learning how to teach there.
Coincidence that you coached basketball in Kobe?
Why? Oh, Kobe Bryant? Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Right. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I guess it's a coincidence.
That's where his name came from, right?
Yeah, his dad was a coach, and they named him after Kobe Bryant, after the city that he coached in. I think Kobe Bryant's dad is named Jellybean Bryant, and he's coached many years in Japan, actually.
I saw one of the games he coached here in Hamamatsu. It was the first BJ basketball Japan game I ever went to, and they were playing a Tokyo team, and he was coaching it. I never saw him again after that, but
he's a pretty well respected person, I think, too, coach.
So you mentioned earlier that you're from Canada, and whereabouts are you from, and how was it like growing up in Canada, just briefly?
Well, I'm from the Midwest of Canada, so that's Saskatchewan. It's about several times larger than Japan in terms of area, but there's only 1 million people. It's got one of the lowest population densities, which means the concentration of people is really low. So I was in a city. Saskatoon is a city of about, well, at the time I think it was about 250,000 people, which is not small. It was the largest city in the area, but it's still not a huge city. So I kind of consider myself and it's kind of a country, like a country town. Like there's lots of cowboys there and country and Western music, and it's farming, agricultural background. My grandfather was a farmer, and he had more land than you can probably imagine, like several miles of land. He grew grain. Not a rich person, well off, upper middle class, but not super rich. But I remember I spent every summer, free time in summer, at my grandfather's farm, learning to ride horses and, paint things. And I did odd jobs. I remember when I was 12, I told my grandfather that I was bored, and he was upset. He didn't understand the idea of boredom, and he said, "Well, I'll give you something to do." He said, "Here's a shotgun," and he gave me a shotgun. I was 12 years old, and he gave me a box of shells, and he said, "Now go out," and he's like, "Go kill some crows," and he said, He said, "My only advice to you is don't shoot a robin." He's like, "Just go for the crows." And I remember I just walked around with a shotgun on his land. There was nobody else around. And every time I saw a crow, I would shoot at it, and never hit him one. And I came home with an empty box of shells, crying, saying like I couldn't get a crow. And he knew that crows are too smart, that they would never ever come anywhere near a gun. They're too smart for that. So he knew I wouldn't catch anything. So that's kind of an idea of my upbringing, kind of I had a regular family, 5 kids, busy parents, both worked. So I was really free. I think I had a fairly good public education. And I fell in love with basketball when I was a kid. And then that's kind of been my passion most of my life.
You also mentioned you're into music and you went to music school, and you went to schools to study music. Was it a normal university then?
Yeah. So I went to the University of Saskatchewan to study psychology, and I graduated from there. But I found a really good music program in the East. So I went to the University of Prince Edward Island. Japanese people might know that university because it's the home of Anne of Green Gables. I think it's Akage no Anne. So there's lots of Japanese tourists there. And I lived there for a year. And I really loved the university there, studying music. But it was a music education program, and I wanted to go into music performance. So I applied to a university in Montreal, McGill, and I was accepted. And then I went there, and I had to do a performance tape, and I got accepted. So that was really, really stressful. But I got there, but it was really... as soon as I got there, I realized I was one of the worst students there in my class. There were some really talented musicians in that class. And so it was really kind of, it was good for me because it really pushed me to learn. But I realized that I don't think I had the talent to make a career out of music. So it was really a great, I loved living in Montreal. It's a wonderful city. I learned French. I was surrounded by a bunch of musicians and artists, and it was a really great time, but it was a hard time because I think it was a time where I had to face, what my talents were and where I fit in. And I kind of realized music is fun to study, but it's not going to be a career.